Hey, what's up? Today is October 30th, 2025. There was a video I made a long time ago where I talked about infatuation, right? That's, I think, literally what the video was titled. And basically, in that video, I talked about how there's people we meet in life who we develop feelings for, and sometimes those feelings are not mutual, they're not reciprocated. We end up finding it difficult to process that, to get over it. And I know this because this has been a running trend throughout my life. Of course, I've never had a relationship, I've never been on a date before, but I've had many crushes. I've had people I've met in life, people who I've never met, who I've never spoken to, who I was infatuated with, who I developed feelings for. And it was often the case that those feelings were not mutual. They were not reciprocated. And it's not like I ever confessed my feelings to them, but they were just never interested in me that way. And I was never able to make a move, if you want to say, because of my own fears, my own anxiety, because I wasn't ready, and they moved on while I didn't. I would just become trapped in this turmoil and allow those feelings to fester and fester. You start finding these ways to catch their attention, to seek for their validation. All you're doing is feeding into what essentially becomes an obsession. And that's a very unhealthy place to be, mentally and emotionally. It can destroy you. So I didn't want to be in this place again. But yeah, I found myself back in it. This was admittedly the main reason why I felt so depressed throughout this month. And it's directly tied to my job, because it has to do with a coworker. So this person, she started working there a little over a year ago. I didn't really talk to her until, I want to say, around March of this year. And she was really attractive, like incredibly beautiful. She seemed to be on the quieter side, kept to herself in the beginning. I always close on the weekends. And I remember there was one point when we closed together, when we had a closing shift. And it was just the two of us past a certain point. And we started talking for the first time. We had our first few conversations. And I don't quite remember what we were discussing, but what I do recall, at one point we were talking about anxiety, and she has dealt with it, and eventually that branched off into relationships. She had asked me if I had a girlfriend, and I didn't want to tell her the truth, that I've never had one, I've never been in a relationship, I've never been on a date, I've never done anything remotely romantic. So I just said, yeah, I've dated around, but I'm single at the moment. So then she said to me, well, I have a boyfriend, and I'm going to be with him forever. She said how much she loved him and how he helps her with her anxiety and other issues that she has dealt with. Apparently they met on Discord, and he lives 8 hours away out in the Midwest. And she wants to move out there and eventually marry him. I thought it was special. That was really special, but it was obvious where I stood, right? And I knew to not get any closer, to keep my distance. And that's what I did. That's what I tried to do. But as the months went on, we became friendlier, and when I came to work one day, she apparently tried to text me and asked me if I had blocked her number. But I had changed my number, so I ended up giving her my new one. And later that evening, she reached out to me. She texted me. There was something I drew at work. I made like a little drawing on a piece of paper and I left it. She asked me if I made it and if I draw by any chance. And I said, yeah, I do. And she was like, oh, cool. I draw too. And from there, we just started texting each other. And we would talk about mostly work, but other things too, like our hobbies. She's big into gaming. She showed me a picture of her computer setup at home. She had this dual monitor display, and a microphone set up like this, a computer rig, RGB lighting. It was sick. It was really cool. She was talented at drawing, similar taste in music. So, you can see where this is going. Like I caught feelings. And it's the worst thing that could have happened. And we were texting for a solid month until when I tried to text her, she left me on read and never responded back. It wasn't until our next shift when she told me that her boyfriend didn't want her texting me any longer. I'm not sure if he got upset or was being hard on her about it. I'll never know what exactly was said between them, but yeah, she wasn't allowed to text me any longer, and I respected that. Everything otherwise was fine. She was her usual self. So I left it alone and didn't think much of it. It wasn't until our following shift together, she was finishing up her shift when I was starting mine. And, when I tried talking to her, she was kind of giving me the cold shoulder. Was turned away, not giving me any eye contact. And I remember the conversation we were having was pretty awkward. I had to repeat myself like 3 times in a row. So, there was like a noticeable shift in the way that she was treating me. And then over the next shift we had, she said hey to me, but it was like very deadpan and like unenthused. And in both cases, like she didn't say goodbye to me either. Like usually she did. Next shift, she was doing she was baking in the back, and I got to talk to her for a little bit, but yeah, like she just didn't seem interested in speaking to me. Again, like minimal eye contact, turned away. Like, she wasn't straight up ignoring me, but you could tell like from her body language, like it was closed off, And I remember at one point we were talking about skincare. She's dealt with acne, and she has her own routine. And I was showing her the stuff that I use. I use benzoyl peroxide bar soap, which has helped me in the past and still does. And I remember saying to her like, "Oh, if you want, I can text it to you. Like I can send you the link." And she said, "That's okay. I'll just stick to my skincare products." I was like, "Okay." And yeah, she didn't say goodbye to me either when she left once again. So I was feeling a little dejected. Like I didn't know how to feel. I felt like I had done something wrong. And then the next shift we had, it was, a similar thing. Like, she was a little bit friendly to me at first, and then just suddenly went cold. But I was still left with these feelings, and I was allowing them to fester. And it was really, really difficult for me to process it. Because in the aftermath of us not texting any longer, I had to come to terms with just how alone I was, because I don't have anyone else to talk to. So that loneliness and isolation really set in, and it's not a good headspace to be in. It's not. So later on, I found out from another coworker, that apparently she regretted texting me and only continued to do so because she thought I was lonely and didn't have any friends. So, when I heard that, it definitely did not make me feel good about myself. I mean, it's not wrong, but that's not the impression you want to impart on people. That's not what you want people to think of you, So, yeah. Eventually, I took the hint, and I had to make a tough choice whether or not I wanted to continue trying to talk to her in person, knowing that I'm carrying these feelings. So the following shift, I just ignored her. I didn't say a word to her at all. And looking back, I was probably a bit rude, maybe, because she would ask me something and I just wouldn't say anything back to her, and she might have suspected something was up with me. But I did it because if I knew this is how things were going to be from here on out, and I would just keep holding on to these feelings, for my own sake, I needed to just fully distance myself. And that's how it's been ever since. It's a really tough place to be in emotionally and mentally when you develop feelings for somebody who isn't emotionally available, who is taken, who doesn't reciprocate those feelings, who doesn't see you that way. But you just have to think about these things rationally. You have to think it through logically. Are these feelings tangible? Are they realistic? The longer you're holding on to it, you're just hurting yourself in the end. And the more you feed into it, you're allowing it to grow into something worse, that being an obsession. And I've been in that place before, and it's horrible. It's not a place you want to be. And look, I'm too old for this. Life is too short. So anyway, I would be lying if I said it doesn't still affect me. Because she was pretty much everything that I wanted in someone who I'd potentially date and be in a relationship with. Maybe that's putting her on a pedestal, of course. I mean, once you're actually in a relationship, it's much different. Relationships take work to maintain in the long term. It's not all sunshine and roses. It's not a fairy tale. There's ups and downs, right? There's tough times. Those tough times can either solidify a relationship or can break it apart. The way she spoke about her boyfriend, how much she loved him, that kind of deep love is something that I hope to experience at least once in my life. Finding someone who is crazy for you like that, is madly in love with you, to be someone's world, that's an amazing thing. And I don't know, I mean, there's many people we meet in life, and there's a lot of people that I have yet to meet. I'm still young, but I hope to find someone like her again, and hopefully the next time, she won't be taken. That's about it.